Now, if we're going to talk about perfect games, no-hitters, we've got to talk about Sandy Koufax. And what is the great Sandy Koufax threw 4 no-hitters in his very short career. He retired before he was 30. At the time he retired, he had the record. It's since been passed by Nolan Ryan. But our piece here celebrates and commemorates those 4 no-hitters. His first no-hitter occurred in 1962 against the lowly Mets, who played at the Polo Grounds. Mel Steiner's the umpire, and Felix Montilla makes the final out. Incidentally, in his first no-hitter of his 4, the first inning was an immaculate inning. He went 9 pitches, 3 outs. His second no-hitter was much more challenging against Juan Marichal of the San Francisco Giants, who had left the Polo Grounds years earlier when they were the New York Giants. And Frank Walsh is the umpire. You can see we have his autograph off of a baseball. And Harvey Keene makes the final out. His third no-hitter was in Philadelphia in 1964. And Ed Vargo was the umpire. And while Bobby Wine is making the final out, he foul tips a ball into Ed Vargo's throat area near his apples atoms. He's in tremendous pain, but he refuses to leave the game. He didn't want to hurt the rhythm of Sandy Koufax. And when you think about it, pitcher's in a great rhythm. If you have to change the umpire with all the equipment change, it might be 20 minutes, and who knows how Koufax is going to fare after that. So after the game, I thought it was interesting. The original Sporting News articles here, Mr. Koufax writes on a baseball, "Thanks for a great game, Sandy Koufax," to the umpire. I thought that was interesting. Now, speaking of real gems, he said his 4th no-hitter is his real gem, the perfect game. And he did that against the Chicago Cubs on September 9th, 1965. And the other pitcher, Bob Henley of the Cubs, was also magnificent. He threw a 1-hitter. So you get a perfect game and a 1-hitter. Can't get much better than that. Many people think it's the greatest game ever pitched. Believe it or not, Ed Vargo's the umpire, and Harvey Keene makes the final out. And there, again, is a handsome, young Sandy Koufax celebrating his 4 no-hitters, holding 4 balls in his hand. Fun, kind of an interesting story. Sandy Koufax is generally regarded as the greatest Jewish baseball player, certainly pitcher. And in 1965, on Game 1 against the Minnesota Twins in the World Series, it was Yom Kippur, and he decided he could not play on that day. Don Drysdale, a great pitcher in his own right, takes over, and uncharacteristically, Drysdale gets bombed. He gives up 7 runs or so in 3 innings. So when Walter Alston, the manager, comes out to get the ball from him, Don Drysdale, as he drops the ball into the umpire, into Walter Alston's hand, says, "Bet you wish I was Jewish too." In any event, that is the great Sandy Koufax. During our time at the Marshall Mel Museum, putting together this exhibit, there are many times where history has repeated itself, as we show at the Polo Grounds, and there have been other times where our piece has been timely in a more of a sad manner. For example, about a month ago, Mr. Larsen, Don Larsen, passed away. But on October 8, 1956, he pitched the only World Series perfect game, a real masterpiece. And here we are celebrating that moment. The first thing I'd like to show people is the ticket. And what makes that ticket so special, it's a full ticket. Nobody went to the game. We've heard all sorts of stories about that, but we don't know for sure why nobody went to the game. I'm sure they felt terrible after knowing what they missed. Here is a program. What I try to do in my pieces, I want to have a scored program contemporaneous to the game. Not something that was done 6 years later, filled out. I want to get the feeling. I like when people are there and they make their mistakes as they put things together. So the next thing I want you to see is that the program is signed by none other than Ed Sullivan. So the question is it that Ed Sullivan? By the way, younger people come here, they don't know who that Ed Sullivan is. But I remember as a kid, it's Sunday night, and sometimes you tell people who seem a little bit unsure, you say, "The Beatles coming to town, Ed Sullivan." They go, "Oh yeah, I remember now." But anyway, was it that Ed Sullivan? Anyway, amazingly, we found photographic proof that Ed Sullivan was at the game signing my program and a few others. He was a sports writer at that time. Now, also telling that story, Mickey Mantle made a great catch to preserve the perfect game. And what we chose to show that was an actual Daily News showing Mantle making the great catch. By the way, he had a home run in that one too. This, to me, was the most important part of the piece, or at least the most shocking part of the piece. Don Larsen is signing a baseball to this gentleman, who's very happy, very happy. He's going to get a signed ball by Don Larsen. Well, who is he? That's the question. Who is he? Well, the hint I always give people, the most hated man in Brooklyn. It's none other than Walter O'Malley. His team just lost the perfect game, and he's happy. I cannot see George Steinbrenner asking Pedro Martinez for his autograph if Pedro Martinez had done a perfect game to the Yankees. But in any event, if after a little bit of time and reflection, it kind of showed his financial savvy. A year or so later, he will be breaking the hearts of all Brooklynites by moving the beloved Dodgers out to Los Angeles. And although it was very hurtful for people in Brooklyn, it may have been the right financial decision. And getting that ball shows another good financial decision. I wish I had that ball. It's worth a lot of money. Also, what I'd like to point out is the scoreboard. Besides showing the special game that Don Larsen recorded, the perfect game, it also shows the Giants are playing the Pittsburgh Steelers at 2 p.m. And why that's important? It's the first game the New York Football Giants will be playing at Yankee Stadium, their new home, after 30 years at the Polo Grounds. And I thought that was interesting. So their first advertisement for that game may very well have been at Don Larsen's perfect game. Another interesting aspect is Babe Pinelli, the great Babe Pinelli, an umpire, retires after the game. Now, generally when you think of an umpire, you think of a controversial call or a bad call. But from an umpire's point of view, a milestone is a perfect game and no-hitter. What better time to retire than a perfect game? Well, another thing I'd like to talk about the Larsen piece, although we just talked about Babe Pinelli, is that Hank Soar, yes, Hank Soar, the gentleman who caught the winning touchdown in the 1938 World Championship for the New York Giants when they beat the Packers that we talked about, he becomes an umpire. Hank Soar, although he wasn't the home plate umpire, was the first base umpire, I believe, in this game. And again, he played a little pivotal part in my life, which we will get to later when we get to the Mickey Mantle piece.